I thought letting my best friend stay with me for a week would be the easiest favor I'd ever done. Instead, it turned into the week that changed everything I thought I knew about Carson and about myself. The funny thing is, it started with a single text. "Hey man, weird question. Any chance I could crash at your place for a week?" I stared at my phone while sitting at my desk, pretending to work on a project I had already spent 20 minutes avoiding. Carson almost never asked for help. That was one of the things that made him Carson. We'd been best friends since we were 16. He was the kind of guy who would drive 3 hours to help you move a couch but refused to ask for help carrying groceries. So when I saw that message, I immediately knew something was wrong. I called him. He answered on the second ring. "Hey!" His voice sounded tired. Not sick, not sad, just exhausted. "What's going on?" I asked. There was a pause. "My apartment has water damage." "What?" "A pipe burst in the unit above mine." "Seriously? Seriously?" I heard him laugh softly. "It looks like somebody sprayed a fire hose through my bedroom." "Damn." "Yeah." Another pause. "The landlord says it'll take about a week before I can move back in." "Then why are you even asking?" I said. "Just come stay here." "You sure?" "Carson." "I know." "No, seriously. Carson." He laughed again. That sounded more like the version of him I knew. "Okay. Thanks, Ben." "No problem. I'll buy food." "You don't have to. I'm buying food." "Fine. And beer." Now you're speaking my language. By the time we hung up, I was smiling, which should have been normal, but it wasn't, because lately, I'd noticed something I didn't really want to think about. Every time Carson called, every time his name popped up on my phone, every time he walked into a room, I felt something I definitely wasn't supposed to feel about my best friend. I had spent months convincing myself it was nothing, a stupid crush, a phase, loneliness, anything except the truth. The truth was simple. I liked him. A lot. And that was a problem because Carson was Carson. Confident. Funny. Good-looking without even trying. The guy who somehow made friends everywhere he went. The guy every girl seemed to fall for. The guy who had absolutely no idea how much space he occupied in my head. So naturally, the universe decided the perfect solution was making him my roommate for a week. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. The next afternoon, I heard a knock on my apartment door. When I opened it, Carson was standing there with 2 duffel bags and a cardboard box. "Miss me?" "No. Liar. Get in here." He stepped inside and immediately wrapped me in a quick one-armed hug. A completely normal best friend hug. Nothing unusual. Nothing worth thinking about. Except my stupid heart apparently disagreed. "Thanks again for this," he said. "Stop thanking me. I'm going to keep doing it." "I know." He grinned. I hated that grin. Mostly because it worked every single time. My apartment wasn't huge. Just a small 2-bedroom place near downtown. The second bedroom usually functioned as an office and storage room. I'd spent most of the previous evening cleaning it so it actually looked like a human being could sleep there. Carson looked around the room. "Damn. What? You cleaned? Don't sound so shocked. I've seen your car. That's different." He laughed. "You cleaned for me." "No. You absolutely cleaned for me." "Nope. Benjamin." I rolled my eyes. "Unpack your stuff." His smile widened. That smile stayed in my head for the rest of the afternoon. The first couple days were surprisingly easy. Almost fun. Actually, more than fun. Felt natural. Like we'd been roommates for years. We cooked dinner together. Watched movies. Argued about sports. Made fun of each other's terrible music. The usual. The only difference was that now he was there all the time. Morning, afternoon, night. And the more time we spent together, the harder it became to ignore the things I normally had space from. The way he smiled when he was genuinely happy. The way he always remembered tiny details from conversations. The way he knocked on my office door whenever he made coffee because he knew I'd want some. Little things. Dangerous little things. The kind that make feelings grow. By the 4th night, we were sitting on my balcony after dinner. The city lights stretched across the distance. Carson leaned back in his chair. You know, he said, I forgot how much I missed this. Missed what? Just hanging out. I looked over at him. He was staring at the skyline. We got busy, I said. Yeah. Jobs. Life. Being old. We're 26. Basically ancient. He laughed. For a moment, neither of us said anything. The night air was cool, comfortable. Then Carson spoke again. Can I tell you something? His tone had changed. Not joking anymore. Sure. He hesitated. Actually hesitated. Which immediately got my attention. Because Carson never hesitated. I've kind of had a rough few months. I frowned. What do you mean? He rubbed the back of his neck. The nervous habit he'd had since high school. I haven't really talked about it. Talked about what? His eyes stayed fixed on the city. And when he finally answered, his voice was quieter than I'd ever heard it. It's about why Emma and I actually broke up. My stomach tightened. Because that breakup had happened 3 months ago. And Carson had never once told me the real reason. Not even me. Then he turned toward me. And for the first time all week, he looked genuinely vulnerable. I haven't told anyone this, Ben. Carson's words caught me completely off guard. I haven't told anyone this, Ben. The joking, easygoing version of him was gone. Now it was just the two of us sitting on the balcony in the dark. And whatever he was carrying around. I leaned forward slightly. You know you can tell me anything. He nodded. I know. But he still didn't speak. For a few seconds, he just stared out at the city. Then he sighed. When Emma and I broke up, everyone assumed it was because we were fighting. Yeah. That wasn't it. I frowned. Then what was it? Carson rubbed his hands together. Nervous. Definitely nervous. We weren't fighting. At least not until the end. So what happened? He let out a humorless laugh. She thought I was hiding something from her. The answer only confused me more. Were you? His eyes met mine. For a second, something flickered across his face. Something I couldn't quite read. Maybe. I waited. He looked away again. She kept asking me questions. What kind of questions? The kind I didn't have answers to. That wasn't helping. And judging by the look on his face, he knew it. Carson. Yeah. You're being incredibly vague. That finally earned a smile. A little. A lot. He laughed quietly. Then the smile faded again. Honestly, Ben, I don't even know how to explain it. Try. The silence stretched. I could practically see him debating whether to continue. Eventually he nodded. Have you ever felt like everyone else figured something out before you did? I blinked. What? About themselves. I stared at him. Now I was even more confused. Not really. He leaned back in his chair. Emma always seemed so sure about everything. Okay. She knew exactly what she wanted. Most people don't. Maybe. His eyes dropped to the floor. But she knew what she felt. The conversation felt like a puzzle where half the pieces were missing. I wanted to ask more. A lot more. But something told me Carson wasn't ready for that. Not yet. So instead I said, you don't have to figure everything out immediately. His gaze lifted. And for some reason, the way he looked at me made my chest tighten. I know. Then he smiled. A real smile this time. Sorry. For what? Dumping all that on you. That's what best friends are for. Something softened in his expression. Yeah. Best friends. The words sat strangely in my chest. Because lately I wasn't sure best friend was all I wanted him to be. The next morning, I was making coffee when Carson wandered into the kitchen. His hair was a complete mess. His t-shirt was wrinkled. And somehow he still looked annoyingly attractive. Morning, he mumbled. You look terrible. Thanks. You're welcome. He grabbed a mug. I watched him yawn. Didn't sleep? Not much. Thinking. His eyes flicked toward me. Maybe. I handed him coffee. He accepted it with a grateful smile. You know me too well. That comment followed me for the rest of the day. Because the truth was, I did know him well, probably better than anyone. I knew when he was stressed, when he was lying, when he was pretending everything was okay. And right now, something was definitely going on. That evening we ended up watching a movie in the living room. Or at least pretending to watch one. I couldn't tell you what it was about. My attention kept drifting, mostly toward Carson. Halfway through the movie, his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. His expression immediately changed. Not angry, not upset, just uncomfortable. "You okay?" I asked. He locked the screen. "Yeah." "Who was it?" He hesitated. "Emma." "Oh." He set the phone face down. "She still texts." "Sometimes." I wasn't sure why that answer bothered me. Shouldn't have. She'd been a huge part of his life. Of course she still texted. But something in my chest tightened anyway. Carson noticed. "You're making a weird face." "I'm not." "You are." I grabbed a handful of popcorn. "I'm watching the movie." "You hate this movie." "I do." "Then what's wrong?" I looked at him. For one reckless second, I almost told the truth. That I hated hearing about Emma. That I hated the reminder that he'd never look at me the way he'd looked at her. That I hated how much I cared. Instead I shrugged. "Nothing." He studied me, longer than necessary. Then he nodded. "Okay." But he didn't sound convinced. Later that night I couldn't sleep. The apartment was quiet, dark. My bedroom ceiling had become fascinating around midnight. By 1 o'clock, I was still awake. At some point I got up and headed toward the kitchen for water. As I passed the living room, I stopped. Someone was sitting on the balcony. Carson. Alone. I slid the door open. "You know normal people sleep at this hour." He glanced over. "Couldn't sleep." I stepped outside. The city lights glowed below us. "Want company?" A small smile appeared. "Sure." I sat beside him. For a while neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't awkward. It never really was with Carson. Eventually he broke it. "You ever wonder how different life would have been if we'd never met?" I laughed. "That's random." "Answer the question." I thought about it, then shook my head. "Honestly, yeah. I don't like imagining it." His smile faded slightly. "Why?" "Because you're the most important person in my life. Because every major memory somehow includes you. Because I can't imagine who I'd be without you." I swallowed those answers. Instead I said, "Because you're my best friend." Carson stared at me, and for a second, his expression looked strangely disappointed. Then it vanished. "So are you." The words should have made me happy. Instead they left an ache in my chest. Because for the first time I wasn't sure best friend was enough anymore. And judging by the look Carson gave me before turning away toward the city, I had a feeling he was hiding something much bigger than a breakup. The next few days should have made things easier. Instead, they made everything worse. Not because anything dramatic happened. Because nothing did. Life just settled into a routine. And that routine started feeling dangerously comfortable. Every morning, Carson made coffee before I woke up. Every evening, we'd eat dinner together. Sometimes we'd watch movies. Sometimes we'd sit on the balcony talking until midnight. The problem was that I liked it too much. I caught myself looking forward to hearing his footsteps in the apartment. Looking forward to hearing his laugh. Looking forward to seeing him. And once I realized that, there was no pretending anymore. I was in trouble. Saturday morning started with rain. Heavy rain. The kind that turned the city gray. Carson wandered into the living room carrying a blanket and immediately claimed half the couch. "You look productive." I glanced up from my laptop. "I've been working." "You've been staring at the same spreadsheet for 15 minutes. That's still working." He snorted. "Come watch a movie." "I have deadlines." "Come watch a movie." "Carson." "Benjamin." I sighed. "You are unbelievably annoying." "I've been told." 10 minutes later, we were watching some terrible action movie neither of us cared about. At one point, Carson stretched and kicked his feet onto the couch, directly against my leg. Neither of us moved, which shouldn't have mattered. Except suddenly I was painfully aware of every point of contact. I focused on the television. The television was much safer. Unfortunately, Carson chose that exact moment to speak. Can I ask you something? Depends. Have you ever been in love? My brain completely stopped working. I turned toward him. What? He laughed. That wasn't an answer. That wasn't a normal question. It wasn't. No, Carson shrugged. I was curious. I stared at him. Where did that come from? He looked toward the TV. I don't know. The lie was obvious. But I let it go. Mostly because I wasn't sure I wanted to answer. Well? He asked. I sighed. Maybe. His eyes immediately moved back to mine. Maybe. There was someone. The words came out before I could stop them. Carson sat up slightly. Someone. Years ago. His expression became strangely focused. What happened? I forced a smile. Nothing. Nothing. He didn't know. The second the words left my mouth, I regretted them. Carson froze. For a split second. Just long enough for me to notice. My heart jumped. There it was. No taking it back now. I looked away. Yeah. The room suddenly felt very quiet. I had never officially come out to Carson. Not because I was hiding it. The topic had simply never come up. And now it had. I waited for the awkwardness, the surprise, the questions. Instead, Carson just nodded slowly. Oh, I risked looking at him. His face was unreadable. That's it? I asked. What? That's your reaction? He looked genuinely confused. What reaction were you expecting? I don't know. Carson shook his head. Then he smiled. Ben. Yeah. You're still you. Something in my chest loosened. A knot I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. He bumped his shoulder lightly against mine. You really thought I'd care? I laughed. A little. Idiot. The warmth in his voice made my stomach flip. And that was a whole new problem. Because now he knew. And somehow that made my feelings feel even more real. That night we ordered takeout. The rain still hadn't stopped. Thunder rolled across the city. Carson was sitting at the kitchen counter when he suddenly asked, Can I ask another question? I groaned. That depends. He smiled. Was he your friend? I froze, immediately knowing who he meant. The guy. The one I'd supposedly been in love with. The truth? There wasn't a guy from years ago. Not really. There was only one guy. And he was sitting 3 feet away from me. But obviously I couldn't say that. So I nodded. Yeah. Carson looked down at his food. That's hard. What is? Having feelings for a friend. The way he said it made me look up. His eyes were fixed on the counter. His voice quieter than usual. Almost thoughtful. Almost personal. You think so? He nodded. Yeah. My pulse started speeding up. The room suddenly felt smaller. Why? A long pause followed. Then Carson exhaled slowly. Because if it goes wrong. His jaw tightened. You lose more than a relationship. I stared at him. The words felt loaded. Too loaded. Like he wasn't talking about me anymore. Like he was talking about himself. The realization hit me hard enough to steal my breath. Before I could say anything, his phone buzzed. The moment shattered. He glanced at the screen. And immediately stood up. I need to take this. Then he disappeared into the hallway, leaving me alone with my thoughts. And one terrifying possibility. What if Carson wasn't struggling with a breakup? What if he was struggling with feelings? Feelings he didn't know what to do with. Feelings for someone he considered a friend. The thought should have been impossible. Ridiculous. Dangerous. Instead, it followed me for the rest of the night. Because for the first time, I wasn't completely sure I was imagining things. Around midnight, I was getting ready for bed when I heard a knock on my bedroom door. Yeah. The door opened slightly. Carson stood there, looking nervous. Again. Which was becoming a pattern. Can I ask you one last thing? I sat up. Sure. He hesitated. Long enough to make my pulse speed up. Then he finally spoke. That guy you liked? Yeah. His eyes met mine. And for a moment neither of us looked away. Do you ever still think about him? The question hit harder than it should have. Because the answer was painfully simple. Every day. I thought about him every single day. and he was standing right in front of me. Sometimes, I said quietly. Carson nodded, but something about his expression told me that wasn't the answer he wanted. Then he gave me a small smile. Good night, Ben. Good night. The door closed, and I lay awake staring at the ceiling, because something was changing between us. I could feel it. Neither of us was saying it. Neither of us was acknowledging it. But it was there, growing, waiting, and sooner or later one of us was going to have to tell the truth. The next morning felt different. Not obviously different. Nothing had happened. No confessions. No dramatic moments. No life-changing conversations. And yet, when I walked into the kitchen and saw Carson standing there making coffee, something felt shifted. Maybe it was because of the question he'd asked the night before. Maybe it was because I couldn't stop wondering why he'd asked it. Or maybe it was because I was finally running out of excuses for what I felt. Morning, he said. Morning. He handed me a mug before I could ask. Just like always, our fingers brushed briefly. Completely normal thing. Except neither of us pulled away immediately. The moment lasted less than a second. Still, I noticed it. Judging by the look on Carson's face, so did he. Neither of us mentioned it. That afternoon we decided to get out of the apartment. The rain had finally stopped, and the city felt fresh and bright afterward. We ended up wandering through a small outdoor market downtown. The kind of place filled with food stalls, musicians, and people walking around with iced coffee. Carson looked happier than he had all week. More relaxed. Less trapped inside his own head. At one point we stopped near a vendor selling handmade art prints. While I was looking through them, Carson suddenly laughed. What? He pointed across the street. A young couple was trying to share a tiny umbrella despite the fact it wasn't raining anymore. The guy nearly walked into a sign because he was too busy looking at his girlfriend. They're ridiculous. I smiled. They seem happy. They do. For some reason his answer sounded thoughtful. Almost wistful. When I looked at him, he was still watching them. His expression unreadable. Then he noticed me staring. What? Nothing. You're doing the thing. What thing? The overthinking thing. I laughed. Maybe. He shook his head. You spend too much time in your own brain. That's rich coming from you. His smile faded slightly. Fair. That was the first time all day he looked serious. And I had a feeling I knew why. Whatever Carson was carrying around, whatever he'd been trying to tell me all week, it still wasn't gone. That evening we picked up food on the way home. Pizza. Because neither of us felt like cooking. We ended up sitting on the living room floor with the box between us. Halfway through dinner, Carson suddenly asked, "Can I ask something weird?" I laughed. You've asked that like 6 times this week. Yeah, but this one's actually weird. That's concerning. He smiled nervously, then looked down at the pizza box. Have you ever been scared to tell someone something? The question hit me immediately. Because yes, obviously yes. I was living that answer. Every single day. Sure. What happened? I took a sip of my drink. Usually I never told them. Carson nodded slowly, like that answer made sense to him. Too much sense. You ever regret it? The room went quiet. I looked at him, really looked at him, and suddenly it felt like we weren't talking about me anymore. Sometimes. His jaw tightened. Then he nodded, almost to himself, as if confirming something. Yeah. My pulse sped up. Carson. He looked up. What? What are we actually talking about? For a second I thought he might tell me. I really did. Something flickered across his face. Fear. Hope. Uncertainty. Then it disappeared. And he smiled. A fake smile. The kind I knew better than anyone. Nothing. I sighed. You're impossible. I've been told. The conversation moved on. But the feeling stayed. Later that night, we decided to watch another movie. Except neither of us was paying attention. The television filled the room with soft light. The movie played. And somewhere around the halfway point, Carson spoke. Ben. Yeah. I'm glad I asked to stay here. My chest tightened. Me too. He looked over. For a moment neither of us said anything. The silence stretched. Not uncomfortable, just full, like there were words sitting between us, waiting. Then Carson looked away first, and whatever moment had almost happened disappeared. The next day was supposed to be Carson's last full day at my apartment. His landlord had finally called. The repairs were almost finished. He'd probably be able to move back in the following afternoon. The news should have made me happy for him. Instead, it felt like someone had punched a hole in my chest, which was pathetic. It was 1 week, just 1 week, and yet the idea of him leaving suddenly felt wrong. Carson seemed quieter too, distracted, like he had something on his mind. That evening we ordered food again and spent most of dinner talking about random things. Old memories, high school stories, the time we'd gotten lost during a road trip. The usual. But beneath all of it, there was tension. Neither of us seemed able to ignore it anymore. Eventually we ended up back on the balcony. The same place where he'd first mentioned Emma. The same place where half our important conversations seemed to happen. The city lights sparkled below. Carson leaned against the railing. "Can I tell you something?" My heart immediately sped up. There it was again. The tone. The serious one. "Of course." He took a deep breath. Then another. And suddenly he looked more nervous than I'd ever seen him. Not during exams. Not during job interviews. Not ever. "Ben." His voice caught slightly. He looked away, then back at me, and what I saw in his eyes made my pulse hammer. Because I recognized it. I'd seen it before. Every time I looked at him. I think I've been lying to myself for a long time. The air seemed to leave my lungs. Neither of us moved. Neither of us looked away. And for the first time since he'd arrived, I had a feeling I knew exactly where this conversation was going. "I think I've been lying to myself for a long time." The words hung between us. The city lights blurred behind Carson as my brain struggled to catch up. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. Neither of us moved. Neither of us looked away. Finally, I managed to speak. "What do you mean?" Carson swallowed. For the first time since I'd known him, he looked genuinely scared. Not nervous. Scared. "I don't know how to explain it." "Try." A shaky laugh escaped him. "That's the problem." I stayed quiet, letting him find the words. After a moment, he nodded. "After Emma and I broke up, I kept trying to figure out why everything felt wrong." His eyes dropped toward the street below. "At first, I thought it was just the relationship." I listened. "But then I started realizing the problems didn't start with her." His voice was barely above a whisper now. "They started before that." My chest tightened. "How long before?" He laughed softly. A sad laugh. "Honestly, yeah." His eyes met mine. "Years." The answer hit me harder than I expected. "Years. Not months. Not recently. Years." Carson rubbed a hand across his face. "I kept telling myself it would go away." "What would?" He hesitated, then smiled sadly. "The questions." I felt my pulse jump again. The questions. Not question. Questions. Plural. Like he'd been carrying them for a long time. A very long time. I didn't want to think about them. His voice sounded tired. So I ignored them. The pieces were starting to come together. Slowly. Dangerously. And I wasn't sure I was ready for where they pointed. For a while, neither of us spoke. The night air felt cooler now. Or maybe that was just my nerves. Eventually, Carson exhaled. "You know what the worst part was?" I shook my head. "No." He looked directly at me. "The worst part was realizing I couldn't stop thinking about one person." Everything inside me froze. One person. Just one. My mouth suddenly felt dry. I knew I should say something. Ask something. Anything. But I couldn't. Because I was terrified of the answer. Carson looked away first. Toward the city. Toward anything except me. "I tried dating." His voice sounded distant. "I tried convincing myself everything was normal." A pause. "It never worked." I swallowed. Hard. The silence stretched. Then finally I forced myself to ask. "Who?" Carson closed his eyes. Just for a second. Then opened them again. And looked at me. Directly at me. My heart stopped. actually stopped. Because suddenly I knew. Before he even spoke. I knew. Ben. My entire body went still. Yeah. He laughed nervously and shook his head. God. This is a disaster. It doesn't have to be. His eyes searched mine, like he was looking for permission, for safety, for something. Then he finally said it. It's you. The world went completely quiet. No traffic. No city sounds. Nothing. Just those two words. It's you. For years I'd imagined hearing something like that. Dreamed about it. And now that it was actually happening, I couldn't think. Couldn't breathe. Couldn't move. Carson immediately looked away. See? His voice cracked slightly. Disaster. I blinked. What? I shouldn't have said anything. He stepped back from the railing, running a hand through his hair, clearly panicking. Forget it. Carson. No, seriously. He laughed again. Except this time it sounded miserable. I'll find a hotel tomorrow. My brain finally restarted. What? You don't have to pretend this isn't weird. Carson. I get it. Carson. He stopped talking. I stood up. My legs felt unsteady. My heart felt completely out of control. And suddenly I couldn't believe how stupid we'd both been. For how long? For how many years? You idiot. His eyebrows lifted. What? I laughed. Actually laughed. Partly because I was relieved. Partly because I was overwhelmed. And partly because it was absurd. Completely absurd. What? He repeated. I stepped closer. You absolute idiot. Now he looked confused. Ben, what are you talking about? I shook my head, still laughing. Then I looked directly at him, and finally told the truth. The guy I liked. His expression changed immediately, slowly, carefully. What about him? I smiled. It was you. The silence that followed felt enormous. Carson just stared, like his brain had completely stopped working, which was fair. Mine had too. You. His voice disappeared. I nodded. Yeah. His eyes widened. Seriously. Seriously. Neither of us moved. Neither of us seemed capable of moving. Then Carson laughed. A shocked, disbelieving laugh. You're kidding. I'm not. What? I know. What? I started laughing again. That's exactly how I felt 5 seconds ago. Carson covered his face. Oh my God. Yeah. Oh my God. I couldn't stop smiling. Neither could he. Years. We'd both spent years doing this. Years hiding. Years assuming the other person didn't feel the same. Years being idiots. And now suddenly everything was different. Completely different. Because the truth was finally out. And neither of us knew what happened next. For a long moment, neither of us said anything. We just stood there on the balcony, staring at each other, trying to process the fact that everything we'd spent years hiding had just been dumped into the open in less than 2 minutes. Carson was the first one to break. He started laughing again. Not because anything was funny, because he was overwhelmed, which honestly made 2 of us. I can't believe this. I shook my head. Neither can I. He pointed at me. Do you realize how long I've been driving myself insane? I laughed. How long? At least a year. My eyebrows shot up. A year. Probably longer. I stared at him. Carson. What? You are unbelievably bad at communicating. He immediately pointed at me again. That's rich coming from you. Fair. Very fair. Couldn't even argue. We both smiled. And suddenly the tension that had been building for days felt different. Lighter. Not gone. Just transformed. Because now neither of us was hiding anymore. Eventually we moved back inside. Neither of us seemed ready to go to sleep or end the conversation. We settled onto opposite ends of the couch, then immediately laughed. What? Carson asked. We're sitting like strangers. He looked down, then grinned. Good point. A second later he moved closer. Not dramatically, just enough. But somehow my heart still noticed. So, he said. So, this is weird. A little. A lot. I nodded. A lot. He leaned back against the couch. You really liked me all this time? I groaned. Can we not make it sound like that? Like what? Like I spent years writing poetry about you. His grin widened. Did you? No. Good. Why? Because I definitely didn't write poetry about you either. I laughed. Thank God. The conversation flowed more easily after that. Like we'd crossed some invisible line. We talked about everything. When it started. How long we'd noticed. How many opportunities we'd both missed. The answers were almost painful. Not because they were bad. Because they revealed how close we'd come so many times. Around 1 in the morning, Carson became strangely quiet. I noticed immediately. You okay? He nodded, then shook his head, then sighed. Kind of. He looked down, his hands folded together, and suddenly he seemed nervous again, which surprised me, because the biggest secret was already out. What is it? His jaw tightened. I don't want to screw this up. The honesty in his voice hit me harder than I expected. I sat quietly, listening. Carson looked at me. You're the most important person in my life, Ben. My chest tightened. Immediately. I mean that. I know. What if this changes everything? The question hung in the air. Heavy. Real. Because it wasn't irrational. We were talking about risking years of friendship. Years of history. Years of trust. I understood why he was scared. Because I was scared too. But after a moment I smiled. You know what's funny? What? I've been worried about the exact same thing. A small laugh escaped him. Really? Really? He shook his head. We're idiots. Completely. His smile softened. And for a moment we just looked at each other. No jokes. No distractions. Just honesty. Finally. It was almost 2 before we headed toward our rooms. We stopped in the hallway. An awkward pause forming between us. Neither of us seemed quite sure what to do now, which felt ridiculous considering we'd known each other for 10 years. Carson laughed nervously. This feels harder than the confession. A little. A lot. We both smiled. Then another silence appeared. Different this time. The kind filled with possibility. My pulse sped up. His did too. I could tell. Then Carson took a small step closer. Not much. Just enough. Ben. Yeah. His eyes met mine. And for a second neither of us looked away. The world seemed to shrink. Just him. Just me. Just this moment. I've wanted to do something for a while. My heart nearly exploded. Oh. Very eloquent. Very impressive. He smiled. Yeah. Neither of us moved. Not yet. The anticipation felt almost unbearable. Then finally I laughed. Softly. You're overthinking again. His smile widened. So are you. Probably. Definitely. The distance between us suddenly felt very small. And for the first time all week, for the first time in years, there was nothing standing between us except courage. Carson's eyes flicked down briefly, then back to mine. And that tiny movement was enough. Enough to make my pulse race. Enough to tell me exactly what he wanted. Enough to tell me exactly what I wanted too. Neither of us had to say it. We already knew. The realization settled warmly in my chest. And for the first time since he'd shown up at my apartment, everything finally felt clear. For a few seconds, neither of us moved. The hallway felt impossibly quiet. Just me. Just Carson. And about 10 years of unresolved feelings standing between us. Or maybe not standing between us anymore. Carson smiled first. A nervous smile. The kind I'd seen before important exams, job interviews, and every major moment in his life. Except this time it was different. Because this time I knew why. You know, he said quietly, this wasn't how I imagined tonight going. I laughed. You imagined it? His face immediately turned red. Oh, great. What? Now I regret saying that. I couldn't stop smiling. Nope. Too late. He groaned. Fantastic. You imagined it? Maybe. I folded my arms. Interesting. Benjamin. Carson. He pointed at me. You're enjoying this? A little. A lot. I nodded. A lot. Despite everything, despite the tension and the emotions and the fact that we just completely changed the course of our friendship, it still felt like us. That was what surprised me most. I wasn't losing my best friend. He was still right there, still making terrible jokes, still rolling his eyes at me, still Carson. The realization settled something deep inside my chest. Eventually, we ended up back in the living room. Neither of us seemed interested in sleeping anymore. We sat together on the couch, closer than usual, not touching, just close. The city lights filtered through the windows. The apartment felt peaceful, comfortable. Carson leaned his head back. You know what I keep thinking? What? How many opportunities we missed. I laughed softly. Probably hundreds. At least. His smile appeared, then faded again. Do you remember that road trip after college? Immediately. Of course I did. It had been one of my favorite memories. Just the two of us driving for 4 days. No plans. No schedule. Just freedom. Yeah. Carson looked at me. I almost told you then. My heart skipped. What? Seriously? He nodded. I was sitting there rehearsing it in my head. I stared at him. And then, I panicked. That made me laugh. Because it sounded exactly like him. And I spent the next 3 years convincing myself it was a terrible idea. That's painful. Tell me about it. I shook my head. You should have said something. His eyebrow lifted. Really? I immediately regretted speaking. Because I knew what was coming. He smiled. Then why didn't you? Because. I sighed. Because I thought you were straight. Carson laughed so hard he nearly fell sideways. Okay, that's fair. Thank you. Honestly, I'd have thought the same thing. See, we're both idiots. Exactly. For a moment we just sat there smiling. The kind of smile that comes when years of tension finally disappear. A little later, the conversation drifted toward the future. Something we had both been avoiding. Because now there actually was a future to think about. And that was new. Very new. Carson grew thoughtful. What happens now? The question made my pulse jump. Not because I didn't want an answer. Because I did. Very much. But because this suddenly felt real. More real than anything else. I looked at him. What do you want to happen? His eyes met mine immediately. No hesitation. No uncertainty. Just honesty. I want to see where this goes. My chest tightened. Warmly. Comfortably. Like something finally settling into place. Yeah. A smile appeared before I could stop it. Good. His smile matched mine. Good. The simplicity of it made me laugh. Years of confusion. Years of feelings. Years of wondering. And somehow the answer was just that simple. Good. Around 3 in the morning, we finally admitted we were exhausted. Carson stood first, stretching dramatically. Okay. We should probably sleep. Probably. Neither of us moved. Again. He laughed. We're terrible at ending conversations. We've always been terrible at ending conversations. Fair. The smile never left his face. Neither did mine. Then he stopped. And for a moment his expression softened. The joking disappeared. The nerves disappeared. Everything disappeared except sincerity. Hey, Ben. Yeah. His voice was quiet. Thanks. I frowned slightly. For what? For saying yes. I understood immediately. Not just the apartment. Not just letting him stay. Everything. The conversation. The honesty. The chance. All of it. My chest tightened again. This time even more. You don't have to thank me. His smile became softer. Maybe I want to. Neither of us looked away. And in that moment, I realized something. The best part of all this wasn't that my feelings had been returned. It wasn't even that Carson felt the same way. It was that after all these years, I finally knew the truth. And the truth was better than anything I'd imagined. Tomorrow he'd be moving back into his apartment. The week would officially be over. But somehow it felt like something much bigger was just beginning. The next morning felt strange. Not bad, just strange. I woke up earlier than usual and lay there staring at the ceiling for a few minutes. The apartment was quiet. Sunlight filtered through the blinds. And for the first time in a very long time, my mind wasn't full of questions. Because the biggest question had finally been answered. Carson felt the same way. Even now, thinking about it still felt unreal. Like I was going to wake up and discover I'd imagined the entire conversation. But I hadn't. It was real. All of it. The late-night confessions. The years of missed opportunities. The ridiculous fact that we'd both been hiding the exact same feelings. I smiled despite myself. Then I heard movement in the kitchen. Carson. When I walked into the kitchen, he was already making coffee. He looked up and immediately smiled. That alone was enough to make my day. Morning. Morning. For a second, we just stood there looking at each other. Then we both laughed. What? I asked. This is weird. It kind of is. We've known each other forever. I know. And somehow everything feels different. I nodded. Different isn't bad. His smile softened. No, it isn't. For a moment, neither of us said anything. Then Carson handed me a mug, just like he'd done all week. The familiar gesture made me smile. Some things hadn't changed. And honestly, I was glad. Most of the day was spent helping him move his things back to his apartment. The place looked normal again. Fresh paint. Dry walls. No signs of the disaster that had forced him out. As we carried the last box inside, Carson set it down and looked around. Well, I officially live here again. I nodded. Looks that way. The smile he gave me was small, but meaningful, because we both knew what neither of us was saying. This wasn't really the end of anything. If anything, it was the beginning. Still, there was something bittersweet about it. For the past week, we'd spent almost every waking hour together. Now things would be different. Not worse, just different. Carson seemed to be thinking the same thing, because after a moment he said, So, you free tonight? I laughed. Carson, what? You literally just moved back in. And you've been living with me all week. Your point. I shook my head. He grinned. And suddenly I felt lighter than I had in months. That evening we met at our favorite restaurant. The same place we'd been going to for years. Nothing fancy, just familiar, comfortable. The waitress actually recognized us. Just the usual? Carson looked at me. I looked at him. Then we both started laughing. What? She asked. Nothing, Carson said. Long week. She shook her head and walked away. The moment she left, Carson smiled. You realize this is technically our first date. The word hit me harder than expected. Date. Not because I disliked it. Quite the opposite. I liked it far too much. I looked down at the table, trying and failing not to smile. Yeah. His grin widened. You look happy. I am happy. The honesty surprised both of us. But not in a bad way. Not anymore. Carson's expression softened. Good. After dinner, we took a walk through downtown. The weather was perfect. The city glowed around us. People passed by. Cars rolled through intersections. Life continued exactly as it always had. Yet somehow everything felt different. Eventually, we found ourselves standing near the river. The water reflected the lights from the buildings above. For a while, we just stood there, enjoying the moment. Then Carson spoke. You know what's funny? What? A week ago, I was freaking out about asking to stay with you. I laughed. Seriously? Seriously? Why? He looked at me, like the answer should have been obvious. Because I knew something was changing. My chest tightened. I just didn't know what. I understood, because I'd felt it too. Maybe before either of us admitted it. Maybe before either of us understood it. Somewhere during that week, we'd stopped pretending. Stopped hiding. Stopped running from something that had been there all along. Carson stepped a little closer. Not dramatically, just naturally, comfortably, the way everything between us felt now. You know, he said quietly, that water pipe bursting might be the luckiest thing that ever happened to me. I laughed. That's one way to look at it. I'm serious. I know. His smile grew. So, any chance I can stay at your place again sometime? I rolled my eyes. There it is. What? The real reason. He laughed, and hearing it made me realize something. For years, Carson had been my favorite person. Not because I was in love with him, though that was certainly part of it. He was my favorite person because he made everything better. Every room, every conversation, every day. And now I didn't have to pretend that wasn't true anymore. I could simply enjoy it. Enjoy him. Enjoy whatever came next. Carson bumped his shoulder lightly against mine. A familiar gesture. One he'd done 1,000 times before. Only now it meant something new. Something hopeful. Something exciting. Something real. And as we stood there together overlooking the river, I realized the funniest part of all. My best friend had only asked to stay with me for a week. But somehow, I had a feeling he was going to be